Lesson 4, Gender. At the beginning of this book, we are trying to address certain topics that English speakers might have a difficult time adjusting to as they begin their studies of the French language. And definitely one of those concepts is the concept of gender. In French, every noun, like pencil, car, table, each noun is going to have gender. That is, it will be either masculine or feminine. Not in a real sense of being a man or a woman. That's not the idea. The idea is grammatical gender. It's a grammatical designation that each noun has. And the reason for this is because the French language is a descendant of the Latin language. And Latin was the language of the ancient Romans. The ancient Romans conquered and occupied places like Italy, France, Spain, much of the British Isles, and in doing so, they brought their language, Latin, with them. And so from Latin, we get languages like Italian, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. The ancient Romans actually had 3 genders. They had masculine, feminine, and another gender called neuter. And by the way, the word neuter means neither. It's neither masculine nor feminine. Over time, as Latin slowly changed into these other modern languages, we lost the neuter gender. So languages like French and Spanish only have masculine and feminine. And here's how this applies to you as a student. For each new noun that you learn about, you need to remember the gender of that particular noun. You need to remember if it's a feminine noun or a masculine noun. And later on, we're going to explain the reasons why you have to know the gender. But for now, just take our word for it. You have to know the gender of each noun you learn about. And it might be tough at first, but you really need to do it. And so that leads me to a question for Francois. As a native speaker, Francois can give us a special insight into what this is like. So my question is, Francois, when you were growing up, did you find it difficult to remember all the genders of the nouns in French, or not?
Yes, well, children has always some mistakes on the genders, but we grew up, so we fix it as you grow up. I think there's no rules. You have to know it, and sometimes you don't even can compute it from the Latin or from.
Yeah, I actually have a book at home. It's called French Nouns and Their Genders, and it's like this thick with all kinds of rules for memorizing the gender, and I'm thinking it's just easier to just memorize it to me than it is to memorize all these rules.
I see your point. But I guess if you're a native speaker, you just grow up hearing the genders being used and the articles with them, which we'll get to later. The article you put with a noun in French has to have the same gender as the noun. And also adjectives. We're going to talk about that a lot later. So if you grow up as a native speaker, it's going to come naturally. But for someone who's learning French for the first time as a non-native speaker, it's going to take some effort and study to do this.
So it's a good way to know you have an English speaker. It's because he messes up all the genders.
Well, I think the key here, especially for our listeners, is practice. If you practice using the correct genders for the nouns, over time it will become second nature and you'll get used to it. So practice is the key.